Okay, so think about this. You have a country that was considered the most dangerous in the world, right? And then in just a few years, it becomes the safest in the Western Hemisphere.
Hmm.
I mean, that's got to make you wonder, how did they pull that off?
It's a dramatic turnaround, no doubt.
It really is.
Yeah.
And a huge part of this transformation, the thing we're going to dive deep into today, is El Salvador's prison system.
Mhm.
It's, let's just say, it's not what you'd expect. It's incredibly productive from what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's really shaking things up. We're talking about President Bukele's Plan Cero Ocio, which translates to Plan of No Leisure. It's a complete shift away from that image of prisoners just sitting around in their cells all day. Here, it's all about work, learning new skills, and basically inmates contributing to making El Salvador a better place, and they're doing it 24/7.
24/7. That's what really caught my attention. When I first heard that, I was like, hold on, what does that even mean? Luckily, we've got some incredible sources that take us right inside. We're starting with a prison called La Esperanza. So, when you were looking at this initial visit, what jumped out at you?
The first thing that struck me was how active everything was.
Yeah.
The warden talked about trabajo, which is work, and they have all these different workshops and aprendizaje, learning new skills. And it's clear that the whole point is to prepare these inmates to desempeñarse afuera, basically, to function well outside once they're released. It's a very proactive way of thinking about rehabilitation, completely different from systems that just focus on locking people up.
And it's super important to be clear about who exactly we're talking about here. So, La Esperanza, this specific prison, houses internos comunes, which means common inmates, and people who were obligada por las pandillas, basically forced to collaborate with the gangs. But the actual active gang members, they've been moved to different facilities. We're also talking about a range of crimes here, from rapes and robberies to scams, the kind of stuff you sadly find in a lot of prison systems.
Right, and that distinction between common inmates and those forced collaborators is interesting. It suggests that the system recognizes there's a difference, that some were deeply involved in gang activity while others were pressured into it. That opens up different possibilities for rehabilitation.
And that idea of productivity, you see it right away. Like, they showed inmates who had construction skills, and they were using those skills to repair the parking lot floor. Now imagine this. There were something like 27,800 people incarcerated in El Salvador. And the rule is everyone between 18 and 59 has to be doing something. That's not just a few guys working on a parking lot. It's a whole system designed to combat idleness.
Absolutely, that scale of activity is a big deal. Keeping people busy can make a huge difference in how a prison is run. It can even reduce conflict inside.
But hold on, because it gets even more interesting. They showed us inmates who already had some medical knowledge, and they were practicing CPR and learning to become medics. The goal, they said, is enseñarles a salvar vidas y prevenir lesiones, to teach them to save lives and prevent injuries. And they've got actual doctors and nurses involved in this program. It's not just about serving time, it's about investing in these individuals, giving them the ability to contribute to society in a positive way.
Yeah, that healthcare initiative is really impressive. It's a smart way to use the skills that already exist within the prison population and turn them into something that benefits everyone inside. It's resourceful, and it gives the inmates a chance to learn something with real-world value.
And when you compare this to how things used to be, the change is incredible.
Yeah.
No more gang graffiti all over the place. They've cracked down on the tráfico increíble de ilícitos. That's the massive trafficking of illegal stuff, like drugs. And it's put an end to the constant gang wars inside, which used to lead to, like, full-on massacres over control of the drug trade. It sounds like the inmates were practically running the prisons before.
It does. It sounds like taking back control from the gangs was a fundamental shift. Our sources really emphasize how gang leaders inside were actually calling the shots for criminal activity outside the prison walls. Cutting off that communication is a big part of why things have gotten safer across the country.
And now we see these same individuals actually involved in making the prisons better. They're building ceilings, constructing structures, literally using their new skills to rebuild the very place they're incarcerated. There's even this one guy, he's learning carpentry, and he calls it un buen trabajo, a good job. And he says, antes no podía y hoy ya puedo, which means before I couldn't and today I can. Talk about a testament to personal growth, right?
It's a powerful statement. It shows how learning practical skills, like carpentry, can give these individuals a sense of accomplishment. But it's not just about keeping them busy, it's about giving them a real shot at getting a job once they're out.
And speaking of teaching skills, there's another guy who used to work in construction on the outside. Now he's teaching other inmates how to build columns safely. It's inmates, training inmates. And the ultimate goal, the big picture, is that all these skills will translate into jobs once they're released. And get this, some of them are already getting job offers while they're still serving their sentences. There's this quote that stuck with me. Darles una herramienta a ellos, darles una ventaja para que puedan incorporarse a la sociedad después de salir acá. Give them a tool, give them an advantage so they can rejoin society after leaving here. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that focus on preparing them for life after prison is key. If they have marketable skills, it makes a huge difference in whether they'll end up back in the system or actually become productive members of society.
And it's not just about manual labor either. They actually have a bachelor's degree program in business administration inside. There are around 60 students, and they're expected to graduate in a couple of years. On top of that, they're teaching technical skills, like how to work at a call center. A university in prison? I mean, that's pretty ambitious.
It is ambitious, but it makes sense. Investing in higher education is a way to help these individuals develop themselves intellectually and professionally. With skills in business administration and call center work, their employment options expand significantly once they're released.
And we even heard from one of the inmates who's in this program. He was incredibly grateful for the opportunity to learn, and he said his goal is to be a better person. He sees how the business studies can help him get a job, maybe in a call center, and he talked about how different the prison is now compared to before. He described the old environment as dirty and chaotic, completely ruled by gangs. He actually said, it was really dangerous for us in here because there were like groups that dominated. The change in atmosphere must be remarkable.
His words are powerful evidence of how much impact these programs can have. This guy is not only looking to improve himself personally, but he also sees the practical value of what he's learning. It really highlights the potential for genuine rehabilitation within this system.
And this idea of prisoners contributing, it goes beyond the prison walls. In the mechanic shop, they have inmates repairing government vehicles like ambulances and police vans. And they even have a prison band called Col de Esperanza.
Using inmates to repair essential vehicles is a great way for the government to save money. It's also a great way for the inmates to learn valuable skills that they can use anywhere. And the prison band, well, that's a different kind of contribution, but it can still create a sense of community and purpose.
And that mechanic shop is no joke. They have different sections for painting, motorcycles, air conditioning, electric vehicles, even a car wash.
Right.
It's a full-service operation. And it's not just about the technical skills. They also have talks about things like self-care and values. It's all aimed at helping them reintegrate into society, helping them leave behind esta vida que han tenido anteriormente, the life they had before.
That's important. They're recognizing that successful reintegration is about more than just job skills. It's about addressing the underlying issues, promoting positive values. It's a more holistic approach.
Then there's the Grancha, which is the farm prison. This is where they send inmates who have proven themselves they're considered persons of confidence. The security is a bit more relaxed, and they're the ones responsible for producing all the food for the entire prison system. It's a way for them to put their new skills to work in a real-world setting. One of the sources put it perfectly. Aquí es donde ejecutan las obras que estuvieron aprendiendo para que las desempeñen cuando salgan en libertad. Here's where they execute the work they were learning so that they can perform it when they are released.
Yeah, the Grancha sounds like a significant step in the rehabilitation process. They're basically entrusted with feeding everyone in the system. It shows that the authorities have faith in their progress, and it connects their skills to a very tangible and important contribution.
And it's a massive operation. They're out there harvesting in the fields, then bringing the food inside to process it, preparing meals for thousands of people every day. Now, there are restrictions, of course. They don't have cell phones, no Facebook, no internet access, but they do get some leisure time for sports, and they can watch censored movies. They even interviewed one inmate who was in for aggravated robbery, and now he works in the kitchen. Hearing those personal stories really humanizes the whole thing.
It does, and it sounds like they're trying to strike a balance. The work is important, but they also recognize that these are human beings who need some downtime. The restrictions probably have to do with security, but the leisure time shows they're not trying to be completely inhumane.
Now, buckle up, because here's the big one. The mega factory. The brand new building, absolutely massive, and they told us we were the first outsiders they'd let in. And the number of prisoners working there making fabrics, it's mind-blowing. Thousands upon thousands. And get this, they're not just making clothes for the prisons, they're also making uniforms for schools, the military, prison guards. It's a huge operation with something like 2,000 workers per shift, and they have 3 shifts running 20/47. That's 6,300 workers total. It's like a major industrial hub.
The sheer scale of this mega factory is really something. It's clearly a big investment, but it's also a sign that they're serious about using inmate labor to meet the needs of the country. I mean, those numbers suggest this factory is making a substantial contribution to the Salvadoran economy.
The crazy thing is, a lot of these guys had never worked with textiles before. They literally had to teach them everything, from how to thread a machine to how to make a whole garment from scratch. There's a quote that sums it up. Totalmente nulos este lugar. Se les enseña desde lo básico, desde cómo enhebrar una máquina hasta faken, cómo producir una prenda completa. Completely new to this place. They are taught from the basics of how to thread a machine to how to produce complete garment. It's like a massive vocational training program.
Yeah, that's a huge opportunity for these guys. Learning a trade like this, it can make all the difference when it comes to finding a job after they're released.
And think about the impact. They're producing uniforms for the armed forces for the prison staff, and they're about to start making uniforms for all the public school kids in the country. They're cranking out 6,000 to 8,000 piezas diarias, 6,000 to 8,000 pieces every day. And they talked to one inmate. He was in for fraud and robbery, and he actually said he believes his sentence is justified. It makes you think.
It does. And when you consider all the different groups that are benefiting from this factory's output, it's clear that it's having a wide impact on Salvadoran society.
And of course, there's the economic benefit. El Salvador doesn't have to import as much clothing anymore, and they're saving taxpayer money. Plus, there's a huge incentive for the prisoners. For every day they work in the factory, they get 2 days off their sentence. Imagine that you could turn a 4-year sentence into a 2-year sentence. That's got to be motivating.
Right.
And remember, it's a 247 operation. It's a completely different picture than the idle prisoners you see in a lot of other countries.
Yeah, the economic benefits are a big deal, and that sentence reduction is a clever way to keep them engaged and focused on rehabilitation. It really highlights how different their approach is.
And the productivity doesn't stop there. They have another operation where they're building desks for schools, and they're pumping out alrededor de 1,000 pupitos al día, about 1,000 desks a day. Plus, they're making chairs, too. And any extra desks they make, well, those get used because the government is constantly building new schools. It seems like a really well-coordinated effort.
That's impressive. It shows they're thinking about more than just clothing. They're addressing different needs, like the need for educational infrastructure, and they're doing it all with inmate labor.
And then there's the fish farming. They have these tilapia ponds with thousands of fish, and we actually saw them fishing with nets and pulling out a pretty decent catch. And they have larger fish in separate pools. It's like a whole self-sustaining ecosystem.
It is. Fish farming adds another layer of self-sufficiency to the whole system, and it's a chance for the inmates to learn about aquaculture.
And they also raise livestock. They have cows to provide meat. But here's a really interesting story. One of the inmates used to be a veterinarian. He had his own practice before he ended up in prison. Now he's the one taking care of the prison's animals. It's a pretty amazing turnaround.
That's incredible. A former vet using his skills inside the prison system.
Yeah.
It really shows you the potential that exists within the incarcerated population.
And his perspective is fascinating. He talked about how this system gives people a chance to redeem themselves, to make amends for their mistakes. He said, independientemente del error que han cometido para venir acá, pueden redimirse y servir a la sociedad de alguna manera. Basically, regardless of the mistake they made to end up here, they can redeem themselves and serve society in some way. He also mentioned that he sees his fellow inmates in good health and actively engaged in their work. That's a pretty strong endorsement.
It is, and it speaks to the positive environment they've created. When you compare it to the old days with the gang violence and the lack of purpose, the difference is night and day.
And there was even a brief mention of equine therapy, using horses to interact with inmates. It seems like they're really exploring all sorts of ways to help these guys rehabilitate.
Yeah, even that brief mention of equine therapy suggests they're thinking outside the box. They're looking at different approaches, recognizing that what works for one person might not work for another.
So you take all of this together, this deep dive into El Salvador's prisons under Plan Cerro Ocio. It's a pretty remarkable transformation. It's a system focused on work, on learning new skills, and there's a genuine emphasis on rehabilitation. It's not just about punishment.
It's a complete rethinking of what prison can be. The variety of activities is mind-boggling: construction, manufacturing, education, agriculture, animal care. It challenges all our preconceived notions of what prison life is supposed to be like.
I mean, who would have thought we'd see prisoners actively contributing to their country's needs? They're making products, pursuing higher education. They're even involved in things like fish farming and veterinary care. It really makes you wonder what's possible if we rethink our own approach to incarceration.
Yeah, the potential is huge. And the long-term effects of this system on the prisoners themselves and on Salvadoran society as a whole, that's something we'll have to watch closely. It's a fascinating experiment.
It really makes you think, could this kind of model, even in a modified form, change how we view prisons? Could it turn them into something that contributes to the greater good instead of just being a place to lock people away? It's a question worth pondering.
For tuning in today, for listening.